Hello. Welcome to our session today. This session being that very special session right after lunch when everybody is at their most alert, especially all of you who have flown in from all kinds of time zones. That being said, we accept the challenge, we embrace the challenge, and we have prepared some special effects and annoying audience engagement exercises to keep most of you awake for most of the time. So this session is all about conversion and conversion rates, and specifically around how payment strategy and best practices in payments can help you significantly improve conversion rates. And you may notice there's quotation marks around the word new, and you may wonder why. That is an excellent question, and I'm not going to answer that right now, but we will get into that certainly. But do know that we happen to believe that there are some fairly low effort tweaks that you most likely can attack right away that will improve your conversion rates, and most of those tweaks are not exactly new. But we'll get more into that in a second. But what we really want, if you walk away from this session with only 2 takeaways, hopefully more, but if there are only 2, that would be great if those are that particular fact, i.e., there's low-hanging fruit with low effort, high impact things that you can do right away to improve conversion rates. And 2, we believe that you actually have more control over these conversion rates than you may perceive today. So, intros. That would be me, Svante. I head up Xsolla Pay, Embedded Finance, and Loyalty at Xsolla. You can tell that I'm from Xsolla by these sneakers and the t-shirt. So I am definitely, per the intro from the godlike voice, definitely more of a payments nerd than I am a gaming geek. But fortunately, with us today, we have a true veteran and a real gaming geek. And I'm very happy to introduce Rafael Morgan from CrazyGames.
Thank you, Svante. Thank you. Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here. My name is Rafael Morgan. I am the VP of Marketing and Partnership at CrazyGames. I've been in the game industry for 10 plus years. And at CrazyGames, we are one of the leading web gaming platforms with 40 million monthly active users, mostly based here in the US. Maybe some of you know, maybe your younger brother or siblings know about us. We work with more than 3,000 developers, right? And we are on a mission really to make a game as accessible as possible through web games, right? So no installs, no downloads, just literally fun, right? And I was invited by Svante and the Xsolla team to come here and share a little bit about our experience working with Xsolla. We started, I think, slightly more than 18 months ago, and been like a really good partnership for CrazyGames. We're seeing a nice growth, and it has an impact not only for the players, but also for the developers the community of developers that we have, right? And that's it. So we'll be sharing some insights. Svante prepared some really cool numbers to share. And if you ever consider bringing your game to the web, I'm just going to do a shameless plug here. Please feel free to talk to me later after the session.
And if there's any doubt based on our flawless performance, we are not paid actors. In terms of format, we want to have this as conversational as possible, so definitely feel free to jump in at any point. We will hopefully get to a Q&A at the end, and if so, feel free to walk up to that microphone. But you can do it if you want to raise your hand and do it in the middle, that's fine too. So let's jump into the content. We're going to start out with some definitions. So we're going to talk about conversion. So let's first define what do we mean by conversion. So conversion, in this particular context, we are referring this as the percentage of the number of players with some intent to complete a transaction that actually completes the transaction in relation to that total data set. In payments, we also usually talk about auth rates or authorization rates, and that refers to one step further down the funnel, which is once the player presses buy or pay, what is the percentage of those transactions that actually goes through? Because in addition to having drop-off on conversion, you also have drop-off from that particular step of pressing pay or buy. So important to keep those apart. And that second part usually falls into what we call payments optimization. And we are more than happy to talk about that too. That's a different, a little bit of a separate session. But we can, if you want to seek me out after, or the whole Xsolla team throughout GDC, we're more than happy to talk about that as well. Now, this is the annoying audience engagement part, or the first one, where we ask questions and you try to answer them. And you may wonder, again, why are we asking these questions? This goes back to the quotation marks around the word new. So how long would we say that gaming has been around as a commercial, let's call it vertical or segment? Anyone?
30 years?
Yeah, probably true. I mean, some would probably argue that it started with computer simulations in the 50s and 60s, but commercially speaking, probably end of the 70s with Pong and Magnavox and things like that, right? Commerce is different, and then we'd probably have to go into definitions. But I would argue that there are historians are going to say it's probably been around since 7,500 BCE. But if we talk about modern retail, which is a little bit more interesting, I think we can say it started probably around early parts of the Industrial Revolution, so early 1800s. Now, the reason I'm asking this, and specifically the one around commerce, is that I'm going to make what probably sounds like an outrageous claim when we talk about the next part here, which is, what are the key drivers for payments performance? And the reason we're talking about this is because this is how we get into conversion rates. This is one of the angles of improving your conversion rates. So first off, we need to understand what are the drivers behind a player, consumer, why do they choose or prefer a specific payment method at what and in what context. And I would argue that there are three drivers that are key. And and the outlandish part of my statement here is that I think these three drivers really hasn't changed much over the last 250 years. So, anyone? Any wild guesses? What are these three drivers? Think about yourself.
Habit.
Sorry?
Habit.
Yes?
Entertainment.
Yes, that's a good one. I mean, specifically for gaming. Anybody else? There are three drivers that will sort of be sort of the super drivers, and some of these suggestion will be sub to one of these three, in my opinion. So the three drivers are trust, convenience, and incentives, and in that order. And this is super important, specifically for some of the things that we're going to talk about later. In other words, if you don't have trust, if you change from a UI that you're familiar with and then get thrown into a UI that you've never seen before as a player, and you don't feel that there's a trust factor, it doesn't matter if it's the most frictionless payment process on the planet. You're not going to complete it. You're going to feel that it's scammy. You're going to move away. You're going to drop it, right? Same thing is true for if you have the trust, but your process for getting from point A to point B includes 15 clicks and 5 signups, not going to happen. And in either one of those cases, you can throw as many incentives as possible. Actually, it could actually have a reverse effect, like on the trust factor and incentive. The more incentives you throw to something that you don't trust, the more scammy it probably looks, right? So these, and I'm not going to go into examples, but think about it from your own, from your experience in life. Like, why did you pick that particular debit card to pay for a specific item with the specific ticket size versus that other credit card that had, maybe miles or points or something like that, right? It usually comes back to these three factors, always. And I would say it's the same thing when you went into some kind of trader, 200 years ago. If they treated you well, if you know them, you're likely to complete the purchase. Okay, moving forward, let's look at the state of the union when it comes to payments, specifically in gaming. This is what we're dealing with, approximately, right? So the average, let's call it abandonment rate, is roughly 64%. And for mobile, you can probably tag on an additional 10 to 12%. So that means of all of your efforts, and the cost of user acquisition we know is high and it keeps going up, right? So you're spending all this money, yet only probably 3 out of 10 is going to convert. So this means the headline gives it away, right? But I want to highlight that in addition to, so let's say hypothetically, let's say that you can take 64% and you can drop it down to 60%. That's 4% top line revenue, incremental. Where else in your company today can you go and find 4% revenue increase tomorrow and make your CFO or finance person jump up and down with joy? There's not a ton of areas, and this goes back to what we talked about at the top of the hour, which is we think there's a lot of potential low-hanging fruit here of low-effort, high-impact things that you can be doing in getting that 64 down to 60 or even lower. So before I asked Rafael a very important question here, I want to also point out that there's a flip side of this coin, meaning in addition to the potential added revenue, the lost sale, i.e. the 64%, it's not just that sale. And this, may sound like it's a given, but a lot of times we don't think about this, because if you want to do the right calculation of like your spend in user acquisition versus what happened when you didn't convert, it's not just that one transaction. You have to count and convert CAC, i.e. cost of acquisition, with LTV, because you didn't lose just that sale. You most likely lost that player forever, or lost that player as a payer forever. So no repeat purchases, no lifetime value. Rafael, does this resonate with you? Like, what are you guys seeing?
Absolutely. I mean, I think, minimal improvement there can have a significant impact. We see this on CrazyGames as well. And I think like once we're talking direct to the player, there's some elements that we're gonna talk later on in the presentation that can influence in that. But definitely, you want to have the best experience for the players at that point.
So let's look at some of the drivers. Why is this number so high? And what are some of the key drivers? And this is research that is a mix of third-party research and some of the numbers that we also that we do ourselves. And again, more than happy to talk more about this and share some of this data with you guys if you're interested afterwards. So this could potentially be surprising, but 60%, it's on pricing, and could be a little bit of a sticker shock potentially, but we'll talk more about that. 40% of gamers say that they abandoned it because they didn't find their preferred payment method. And 30% approximately, this is the convenience factor, right? Too much friction. And then 25% is basically there's a difference between what they thought they were going to pay and then there's some added costs. So this is where local taxes or anything of that sort will come in. And then 20%, this is the trust factor, right? Some kind of security concern. Question, do you guys see any kind of pattern here? The hint is that it's related to low-hanging fruit. So if you look at some of these numbers and the factors, you can see that most of them are actually not technical. It's not it's not related to your platform, it's not related to your commerce partner. Like most of these are not technical. Most of them, in fact, are related to how easy and clear you have made it to the player what is about to happen and what they can expect next. So, do you see anything, like, are there any challenges that you don't see here or something that you have seen pop up that is specifically to your experience?
So it's even related to me personally, right? So I was born and raised in Brazil, and then I now live in Switzerland since 20 years. And when I think about it, how consumer behave in Brazil, right? They have their own ways of payment. Like there's something called Pix now, but before they had boletos, which was a very particular thing in Brazil. And if you don't have that locally, like, you know, it's very likely the user will see a purchase screen and he will not punch in the credit card or anything like that. So you need to have this localized payments, right? Same in Switzerland, we have something called Twins, where actually everybody use this to do different purchase. So very, very important to understand the local markets, right? And actually have it available to facilitate the purchase and also to build trust as well. Because, you know, you will see that this person, especially in Switzerland, companies that use Twins are companies that understand the market, right? And I think like another point that we see a lot is like whenever, you know, you have a confusing or a lengthy, you know, process for them, if they see different screens popping up and it's not so smooth, I mean, there's a lot of friction, they can, you know, just leave quite quickly. And I think, you know, what's also important is a lot of trust, especially when you're talking in a gaming platform where you have a very broad audience from teens to, you know, seniors, right? So you do need to have a lot of trust for them so they see it and they feel like empowered to make a purchase. So those are some elements that we see it.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, we'll talk a little bit more about each one of them also as we go into prescriptive mode here. So we're going to share some of the best practices that we have collected over many, many years, but also in talking to our customers and looking at both third-party research and our own. So some of the best practices, and this will go back, again, tie it back to some of the low-hanging fruit and how some of these are neither new nor very complicated or technical in nature to go after. So first, simplify, right? But it's not just simplify and clarify, but, you know, clear interface, clear UI. But it's also the more you can move up in earlier in the funnel, letting your player know what's about to happen and what they can expect and how long it should take, things like that. I mean, we've seen lifts of up to 35% just by making the design changes and having the information be more transparent throughout the process. So clarity, even before you get to the payments UI and the payments or payments UI, payments page, right? Local optimized payments, this is huge. It's probably one of the lowest hanging fruits available also. I mean, if you go in and you globalize your game and you're accepting credit cards only, you're going to have massive fails or very, very low acceptance numbers across regions like APAC and LATAM and things like that. And do you have any additional? Well, you mentioned Pix in Brazil. Like anything else, like Asia Pacific or something that you have noticed?
I think those are like markets that are more closely related to, and I think those are really important for those markets. Switzerland in particular, I think it's also a very unique country with this system that they have. But yeah, so those are very close to me, so I can talk better about it.
Yeah. But also an important point, I think you can go beyond, like, quote unquote, just making sure that you know what the payment methods are. Like, the more data you have on your user, the more you understand your user, the better you're going to be able to serve up not just the most popular payment method in a specific region, but the payment method that particular player prefers for that particular type of transaction. And I want to highlight that one of the best ways of doing that, in knowing this, is making sure that you make it super easy to save, or what we call tokenized, that particular payment method. So some players will prefer one payment method for microtransactions, whereas they will pay with maybe a credit card or something else for something with a higher ticket size. So know your user is a key here as well in serving up the right, and having the ability to smartly, intelligently serve up the most relevant payment method for that particular geography and payer preference. Trust signals, we talked about this. I want to highlight here, and I think first off, most users, consumers, players don't know or care about data security. So it's more actually about the perception of trust than actual data security. You have to have security. You have to have data security. We, as a payment service provider, we have all kinds of certification and compliance and regulations across the planet. That's one thing. But for the user, for the consumer, it's actually more about the perception of trust. And one of the things that I want to ask you is, one of the things that I've noticed is a lot of the handover sort of from the game to the payments UI, a lot of times to me, seems like there's something that could be improved. Like the trust is probably more with the game than the developer, and definitely more with the game, the developer, than the payment service provider. So do you think there's something that can be done in the handover there to sort of transfer the game trust?
That's a great question, Svante. I think yes, there is a lot of opportunity for game developers to be transparent and communicate, what the real value about it, with no hidden stuff or no surprises, right? So transparency is very key. So whenever the player opens the screen, he's already prepared, right, to make the purchase. So you increase your conversion there. I think having sort of like a smooth transition between the game brand towards the payment method is also another important element, right? So we're different companies that are working together. So this elements of combining helps a lot. And I think it's also like, the technology, the speed of loading and all those things are also very, very important elements, like, embedding this sort of as kind of native function within your game. I think those are very, very strong elements that we see can improve conversion. And, we all kind of in this dream mode of video games where things are magically work together, right? It's like amusement park of a digital amusement park, and the things they need to combine together to magically, work for the player. And when this happens, just wonderful, right? There's nothing more frustrating than actually wants to purchase something and the stuff doesn't work, or it looks fishy, or it's just, you really want that.
Yeah. And to your earlier point, like, it's definitely more important than probably any other type of commerce transaction. The instant gratification, like your ability to, like, you want to get back to the game, right? Last point. We're not going to talk a ton about this here today, but to my earlier point, I think there's stuff that you can do where you you combine incentives with certain payment methods, and you can move that further up the funnel again. Quick example of how this has been done in other contexts. You're familiar with BNPL, Buy Now, Pay Later? There's one of the leading companies called Klarna. It's originally from Sweden. One of the reasons that they grabbed like 30% of all e-commerce in Sweden in less than 3 years. One of the reasons that they were able to do so was that they partnered closely with the merchant in being able to send a signal to the merchant as soon as they could recognize the user somehow for all kinds of different data points. They could basically say this user is pre-approved, right, for a promotion. So they were able to already on the landing page basically send a signal where, hey, Klarna is available to you. You're pre-approved, whatever the messaging was, but you're pre-approved, and if you use Klarna for your first purchase, you get 15% discount. So using incentives and rewards and loyalty together with payments methods and move it up the funnel is an incredibly efficient way of increasing conversion rates. and also create a specific, a closer relationship for retention and repeat purchases as well. Okay, this is kind of an extreme number. I don't know if I buy the under 1%. This is coming from, we have the research, but even if it goes down to, single digits, 5 or high single digits, it's still massive, right? And so we just want to highlight the fact that convenience is a huge factor, and to my earlier point, the more you can tie it together and make it a personalized experience and a personalized, what to serve up when, and there's an incentive or loyalty element tied to that particular payment method, you have incentive and hopefully trust, and you got the convenience factor with the one-click solution. So at that, I think we're at time. Is that correct? Yes? Yeah. Q&A? Any questions? We have, I'm not going to, this is all available. We have, I don't want this to be a sales pitch, but Xsolla Pay is Xsolla's one-click checkout. It's available to all Xsolla merchants with the flip of a switch. We can talk about that later. I'm happy to talk about it outside the session. We also have a great case study together with CrazyGames, whom we did not pay to do the study nor to be on stage. And he's not a paid actor. But CrazyGames have some amazing, and other partners that we can talk about have implemented this as one way of increasing conversion rates, and we're more than happy to talk about that. Reach out to me, come by the Howard, 661 Howard, and more than happy to talk about it. Now, do we have time for 1, 2 questions? Yeah? No?
Does anybody want to ask a question?
Any questions? Then we do have time. Anyways, thank you very much for coming to the session today. Hopefully you will walk out with at least 1 or 2 things. And again, contacts, scan this thingy here. You can connect with me, connect with Rafael. And like I said, we're over at the Howard, 661 Howard, the Xsolla space. More than happy to talk more about these topics. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.